Erin, thank you so much for being here and being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, let's dive right in. I appreciate you being here. For those that don't know, we tried doing this, and my connection was so bad, and Erin's been very polite and accommodating. So thank you for being here, and let's start off diving right into it. So you served in the Army National Guard, and now you're a recruiter and a training manager. Can you tell us what inspired you to transition into recruiting?
I think it was just chance, really. I had never envisioned myself as a recruiter. I have a bachelor's degree in marketing and communication, and I originally interviewed with the company that I'm currently with, Aviation Search Group, for a marketing and media role. However, at the time, they didn't have an opening, and they asked me if I'd be interested in joining as a recruiter for the time being until a marketing role opened up. And when I got in the role, I absolutely loved it and didn't really want to transition back to a marketing role.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Have you noticed that with your military background, how it's influenced your approach to talent acquisition?
Yeah, so I think, just having a military background, I would be more detail oriented when it comes to specific aspects of, talking to people as well as reviewing their qualifications. It gives you kind of that leg up and what you're looking for. Plus, also, I've talked to some pretty high ranking officials, and I feel like that comes into play with not being afraid to, go out and reach out to anybody that's possibly necessary for the role. I'm not afraid to take no for an answer, just based off of my experience.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I mean, obviously you're a really hard worker, and I'd love to give the audience an idea here just so they understand who's your typical candidate and your typical client so they know.
Yes. So we work with aviation companies all across the United States, some international as well. We work both corporate and commercial. So we're working with, airlines as well as private companies to help them hire anything that they're looking for as long as they're an aviation company. So, we do IT, HR, pilots, mechanics, sales roles, anything an aviation company asks of us, we do it for them.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, let's dive into some of the details on what you see because you're boots on the ground, you know exactly what's going on in the market, or you have a good viewpoint, right? I mean, we don't expect you to
Mhm.
know everything and anything that's going on, but what are the most common mistakes you see executives making during the interview process?
I think being overconfident. You're joining a new company and there's still stuff that you're going to have to learn. You don't know everything off the bat. It's going to be a transition for you, but being confident in yourself is great, being able to sell your skills and your qualifications, but being overconfident is something completely different. You don't want to go in and pretend that you know everything that there is possible to know, especially, when joining a new company. It's something that you're going to have to take the time to kind of learn as you get there.
So the interesting thing about that is I just had somebody else say a very similar thing. And it's starting to become a trend almost. So are you seeing that more and more with executives? Maybe they've got a solid background, but they're just saying, "Hey, I know exactly what needs to happen," and they're kind of just blazing through everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had people, entry level positions we work on all the way up to C-suite executive level positions. And I would say people that have, 30, 40 plus years, they feel like that they have, been there, done that, which is probably the case. You do have all that experience to bring to a company, but this is a new company that you're going to be joining. There are things that, you're going to have to learn as you go along. You may have had, XYZ amount of experience throughout your career, but there is always a point where change is going to happen in the industry as well as at a company. So you're going to have to be able to be malleable and, learn.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because it's such a you would think it'd be such a simple thing and experienced, I guess experienced executives would know. They
Mhm.
know there's a lot of change, a lot of different things in companies, but that really does seem to be a trend. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about somebody giving you kind of a scenario. Let's have an executive, they haven't interviewed for years, and maybe they were in a long-term role. Maybe it was a decade, maybe it was longer or shorter. But what are the first things they should do to prepare for the interview process?
In my opinion, it would be learn about the company you're speaking with or speaking about. So we work, the company that I work for, Aviation Search Group, we work as like a middleman. We're headhunters. So
Hmm.
I'll interview people for that company on behalf of them and then set you up, with the hiring manager. But I'd still like you to, learn a little bit of information about who you're speaking to and speaking about. So if, you go to the company's website and you see that they work on this type of equipment, and you can kind of talk about that during the interview, it brings it brings the idea that you've done your homework. You have put some background information in your own mind about what this position is, about what the company is. And going along with that, once you do your homework on the company that you're going to be speaking to, ask some questions regarding that company, what the culture's like, things like that. So you can kind of get an understanding of what you're kind of going to be stepping into, as well as showing that you are interested in the role and the company and have done some research on it.
And would you suggest that they ask you about that as well and get kind of your insider tips before even going in and then asking the hiring manager the same thing?
So I think that there are some questions that are more uh, geared towards the hiring manager. I love it when candidates ask me. If I can't get the answer for them, I'll either tell them to hold on to that in their back pocket until they speak to the hiring manager, or if it's something that's a little bit easier, I'll go out and ask the hiring manager myself to give us that information.
Yeah.
But I do like when a candidate comes to an interview with a question or questions in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. It reminds me, I saw a clip last night, actually. So I'm happy that we waited to do this podcast because you'd think it would be common knowledge to know a little bit about the company that you're applying for, know more about it. But I saw a clip about a new app that's out there where if you upload your resume to it, you swipe right and it applies you to a position directly to the website. And if you swipe left, it doesn't. Kind of like a dating app, right?
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know if
Okay.
it's real, but I saw it and I just thought, man, what a headache for hiring managers, right? Because people don't know
Hmm.
the companies. All they see is salary, title. Oh, yeah, I'll apply to it. So that's
Yep.
another reason why everybody's overwhelmed with all of these resumes and people that aren't even qualified, but they just want their name in the hat so they can maybe win the lottery, right? And so
Right.
I love that you're underlining that of know the company. Know the company, know what's going on, have some key questions there. I don't mean to be repetitive on what you're saying, but just I hope people are going to listen to that and then get a good understanding of how
Yeah,
important that
absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do think it kind of, gives you or gives the hiring manager an idea that you have done a little bit of homework and you are interested in the role.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting how important it is just to come off with a little bit of intrigue or interest in the role so that people know that you are interested. I mean, I was just barely interviewing some people for our company, and it's really interesting to talk to people that say they're interested, they apply, they seem like great
Hmm.
fits, and then you go through the process and you realize they have no idea who our company is. All they saw was the salary, right? And then they're happy they
Right.
got in the interview, and then our team goes away from it saying, I really don't think they know what we do,
Right.
right? But they loved the salary, right? And so it's funny how
Yes.
easy it is to stand out in this competitive market if you just do a little bit of
Yes,
research.
absolutely. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm happy we're on the same page there. I've got another question for you. So, what's one question you always ask candidates during an interview, and what are you really looking for in their response? Is there a typical question you have there?
So I like to keep my interviews more personal.
Mhm.
Try to learn more about you as a person, as a candidate, why you're interested in the role. One question that I always start out with, just to get to know each individual a little bit better, working specifically in the aviation industry, I always ask people what got them into aviation. Why did you choose to be a pilot? Why did you choose to be a mechanic? And I've gotten some really, really interesting answers over the years. I've talked to somebody whose dad was one of the most type rated pilots ever. He was able to fly, the most aircraft possible. So I like to kind of ask that just as an icebreaker to get the person more comfortable. Not throw anything super out there off the bat. Just get to know them a little bit better as a person, see why they chose this career path.
Hmm. Yeah. And does that ever sway you in or just kind of kick it off in the right mood? Is that what you feel a lot, right? It kind of breaks it down of,
Yeah.
what their motivation is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't ever use it as like hey, this person is only here because it pays the most amount of money. I don't actually care if that's what your answer is, that's what your answer is. I just like to
Yeah.
know, why throughout your career or earlier in your life you chose aviation as your career. Like what got you interested in it?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love asking that same question on our podcasts, right? I love asking what got people into recruiting and coaching, consulting. So it makes sense. It's a great icebreaker, and good for
Hmm.
people to know. Kind of get a good understanding of how they can come off more personalized and so people can understand who they are, not just that they have a good background,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Well, another thought I have for you is from your perspective, what's the difference between someone who gets to the final round of interviews and someone who actually lands the job?
So with this one, I think it's more of a personality thing. You could be the perfect candidate on paper, but if you don't jive with the hiring manager, that's probably going to be something that's a red flag to them. You could be, 20 plus year veteran of the industry of experience, but if you're going to be a stick in the mud and the hiring manager's a bubbling, outgoing personality, I feel like somebody that matches more with them is going to be somebody that's hired. And vice versa. You could be super out there and the hiring manager could be more reserved and introverted, and somebody that fits more with their style is going to be the person that's hired for the role. So I don't really think it's ever anything, one person does wrong, one person does right. I just think it's a personality fit with the hiring manager.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say it's kind of similar with cultural fit as well? Kind of the hiring
Yeah.
manager is the one sticking their necks out, just like how you're sticking your neck out for your client, bringing a
Hmm.
candidate to the table, right? I mean, I would assume most hiring managers would say, you know what? I don't get along with this person. I don't know them. I don't know if I would be willing to say, hey, let's hire this person because if they leave in 2 months, it's their neck on the line, not the executives. All right. Would you
Correct.
agree with
Yep.
that? Okay.
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah. Yep. I think
Okay.
somebody personality and culture wise that fits in well with a company and a hiring manager, that's more than likely going to be the person that's hired throughout the whole process.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's exactly why we have friends and why work with people, right? Everybody loves working and talking to people that they get along with. So that I
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
that insight. What's one piece of advice you'd give to an executive who feels stuck or invisible in their current job search?
I think the most important piece of advice that I can offer is don't give up. And just remember that as you're looking, your network is probably going to be one of the most beneficial things that you can have. I don't know how many times I've reached out to people on LinkedIn, be like, "Hey, are you interested in this role?" And they're like, "No, but I know somebody." You may not
Mhm.
know every single person you connect with on LinkedIn. I probably couldn't tell you 90% of the people I'm connected with, but having that network that you can, go out and kind of network with, those are the people that are important, especially, throughout the industry that you're working in. I think that the relationships you build with those types of people, they can help you out in the future. And I would suggest that to anybody that's looking for a job, whether you're a high level executive, entry level, the more people that you can meet that, are similar to your background, the more beneficial that can be throughout your career.
Mhm. Yes, and I'd love to hear if you agree with this as well. I had a guest on our podcast a couple weeks ago, probably a couple months ago now that I'm thinking about it, but they said spend 10% of your time applying cold online and spend the rest of your time speaking obviously to recruiters and people in your network. Would you
Mhm.
agree with that?
I do think that there have been a lot of people that have reached out to me that, whether I can help them right that moment or not is a totally different story. But I always keep those people in the back of my mind. That person
Mhm.
reached out for help. They gave me some insight into who they are, what they're looking for. And I either, keep that to myself, not usually, but I'll also share that with my colleagues as well. There are 15, 16 of us at our company and we all work together. So if I can help one of them and they can help you, that's always definitely going to be something that we're going to help each other and the candidate with.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's always good to know. And I'm seeing a lot of people that are just struggling online. I mean, our clients, they have the brand taken care of, but when the job search comes around the corner, if you're applying cold online and you've got people using AI, just submitting
Hmm.
random resumes for random job applications, it is difficult. So I love the emphasis on the network, right? Use your network,
Yeah.
even if you don't know everybody in your network, start to get to know them, utilize your time in the right way.
Yeah. And
Um,
if you reach
yeah.
recruiters too, it also gives you, the personal touch to it. You're not just applying for a job. You could send them a message like, "Hey, I'm interested. Here's some of my qualifications. This is why I'm interested," things like that. So I think, reaching out to recruiters, not just applying to a job and spam applying to multiple jobs, reaching out and kind of making that connection is something that is beneficial to people that are looking.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And what's the best way? Let's say somebody's listening or listening to this when it becomes live and they say, you know what, I am a perfect client. My companies would love to hire Erin and her company, or, I'm a great candidate and I'd love to get some insight from Erin. What's the best way for somebody to reach you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Erin Wood. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. We also have a website, aviationsearchgroup.com, and my email is Erin. That would be Echo Romeo India November at aviationsearchgroup.com. If anybody wanted to reach out to me, they're definitely more than capable, and I would definitely appreciate that. I'd love to give any help and offer any advice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. I appreciate you being an amazing guest and for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you.